Gonna wait 30 more seconds just to give a few other folks the opportunity to join us. So I see the participant count climbing pretty steadily, so just bear with us. Okay, it looks like we've plateaued, at least for the time being. So good afternoon, everyone. I thank you for your interest and for making time in your schedule to attend today's session on tuition remission. I asked if I could have just a minute before turning it over to Michelle Jones, DAUR's Office and Budget Manager, really to do two things. One, in the face of so much uncertainty, not only about the pandemic and all of the financial and racial implications that it has created, but also with the election still unknown, and wanted to underscore something that unites us all, and that is not only our employer Fordham, but also the belief in higher education, and in particular Jesuit higher education, as something that is transformative. Transformative for our students and transformative for so many of us when we ourselves become those students. So wanted to just convey that to you all. Also wanted to thank, before they are formally introduced, colleagues from HR, General Counsel, and Financial Aid. They are our partners on so many issues that we deal with. And so on this issue, I'd like to especially welcome them to our DAUR community as full partners, and hope that you'll give them your best attention. So with that, I'd like to turn the program over to Michelle Jones. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Roger. Good afternoon, everyone. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank our presenters from Human Resources, our legal counsel, and financial aid for hosting this session for the DAUR division. Today's presentation has been tailored to answer the questions raised on our Google form. If you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to utilize the chat feature, as our presenters will be monitoring the Q&A. I will also share a copy of this presentation after our session. So I'll now turn it to Stacy Vasquez in Human Resources. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Stacy Vasquez, Assistant Director of HR Operations, and I'm going to introduce the great panel that we have today. So we have Kamal Joshi, Associate VP of HR, Nancy Hark, Assistant VP of HR, Damari Cardona, Senior Director of HRIS, Eileen Busby, Benefits Manager, Susan Moran-Defina, Assistant Director of Student Financial Services, and Daniel Carell. He's Associate General Counsel. And he is going to kick off our presentation today. So if you give me a moment to share my screen, he will be with us in about 30 seconds.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Daniel Carell, Associate General Counsel. I'm going to start the presentation. You can go to the next slide, Stacy. So we have about 6 key points we want to discuss today. First, I'm going to discuss the taxation rules and regulations concerning graduate school tuition remission, some exceptions. And then we'll move on to the evaluation process the committee uses in determining whether a tax waiver applies. Some key points to keep in mind. Then representative from financial aid will discuss some resources available to those that it's been determined that their tuition remission is taxable. And then your group submitted a fair amount of questions that we'll try our best to answer. And if there's time, there's the Q&A chat feature that we'll use and try to answer any additional questions that we can. So one of the questions you had was who's on the committee. So that's the committee. You'll hear from most of us here today. You can go next, Stace. Okay, so the purpose of this portion of the presentation is to provide greater clarity as to the law, the relevant law and regulations, and how they relate to graduate tuition remission taxation. So in general, the Internal Revenue Code and regulations deem anything of value provided by to an employee by their employer to be a form of compensation, which is taxable. All compensation must be included in the employee's gross income unless an exception applies. So now the general rule for taxation of tuition remission benefits are as follows. First, tuition remission for graduate studies for teaching and research assistants is not taxable as gross income. Now, I know that probably doesn't apply to most, if not all, on this call. So we'll move on to the other rule, general rule, is that for all other graduate students, tuition remission is taxable. That's the general rule to start from. There is an exception, though. The regulations provide that the first $5,250 worth of tuition remission benefits per calendar year are not taxable. So general rule is it is taxable but beyond $5,250. So the exception to that general rule is under certain limited circumstances, the tuition remission beyond that amount may be excluded from an employee's gross income. So how do you get that? How does that exception apply? There's a two-prong analysis. This first slide addresses the first prong of the analysis. So in order for the exception to apply, first, the education must be needed to maintain or improve skills in the employee's current job, or the education must be required by Fordham or by law for the employee to maintain his or her current job, salary, or status as long as that applies, serves to Fordham's business purpose. You go next. So the first, again, in our context and with the group we're dealing with today, it's that first prong that we tend to address most. And the key part of that definition there, and it comes directly from the regulations, is the course that the employee is taking must be relevant to that employee's current job duties and must improve their or maintain their skills in that job. So that's where there may be, I don't want to say confusion, but maybe some clarification would be helpful here. It's the key word there that's highlighted and italicized is the current job duties. So, many people are take courses or a program, whether at MBA or something else, to advance their careers. And some of the courses they take during the course of that program may apply and may be relevant to what they're doing now, or it may be, it's a job they're looking to get, a promotion they're looking to get. It's important to know that when we analyze this, and this is not, our own rules, Fordham's rules, this is the IRS regulations. In order for it to be excluded and, exception to apply, the course must relate to the employee's current job duties. So that word current gets highlighted, throughout. Go next. This is just the second prong there, which, like I said, doesn't come up as often, but in the event that you're required to pursue or achieve a degree to maintain your job or your salary, that would also be an exception. So there's an exception to the exception, though, where the courses apply and relate to your current job and or are required to maintain your salary, like I said, that second part before, the exception does not apply if the education, one, qualifies the employee for a new trade or business, or is for the employee to meet the minimum educational requirements of their job. So this comes up most frequently, and not, again, not within your group, but we're trying to give, a overview of how it works and how we're dealing with it throughout the university. You just go back for a sec, Steve. So the qualifies for a new trade or business, just to give an example, that comes up most often with regard to law school. If an employee is taking courses and pursuing a law degree, the regulations say that qualifies that employee to, in that case, sit for the bar and qualify them for a new trade or business. And if that's the case, the regulations say the exception does not apply, even if the two first prongs are satisfied. You can go next now. So the bottom line here is, if the education meets the tax requirements, the tuition remission will not result in taxable income. The employee, must show, Fordham in this case, that they qualify for the tax waiver by presenting thorough documentation, which we'll talk about in the next part of the program. So, this is a concern, doing this properly and properly allocating waivers where they apply and not where they don't, is important for both the employee and for Fordham. There are consequences if this is not done properly and correctly. For the employee, they could be held liable for back taxes for the value of the benefit, including possible penalties and interest. And the same goes for Fordham. If we don't properly withhold taxes, federal, state, local, FICA, that sort of thing, we can be liable, Fordham can be liable for penalties. So I think Eileen Busby, who is the benefits manager at HR, is going to go through the evaluation process with you now.
Thank you, Dan. So yeah, I'm now going to tell you a little bit about the evaluation process. So your tax waiver requests are reviewed by the Graduation Tuition Remission Tax Waiver Committee. And first you need to submit the tax waiver request form, and it has to be signed by your vice president. With that, you need to include a copy of your job description, the course descriptions, as well as justification of how each course directly applies to your current position. Once the committee reviews the documentation that you've submitted, if any of the courses are denied, we would then go back to you and ask if you want to submit additional justification explaining how the courses are related to your position. If you do that, and if that's reviewed by the committee, and if it's still denied, then that would be the final determination. Next. So tax liability for employees. So as Dan did mention several times, the first $5,250 per calendar year is considered tax-free, and all amounts in excess of $5,250 in a calendar year are subject to withholding taxes. And the taxes are withheld from employees' paycheck in the semester in which the tuition remission is received. And payroll sets up the tax withholding, and they typically do it in over 6 paychecks during the semester. That's assuming there's enough time. So if there's any kind of a delay in the paperwork, they may not have 6 semesters. But generally, they try to set it up for 6 paychecks. Next is Nancy.
Oh, Kamal, can you restart my video?
Nancy, you should be able to start your video yourself. I don't have control.
The host has stopped it, so I can't start it. Is that Stacy?
Speak out.
What?
You can just talk.
Okay, you don't need to see my face. Stacy, can you go back one? Oh. Stacy, can you go back one slide? Thanks. So some points to keep in mind. The tax waiver is assessed on a course-by-course basis, and it's not based on the degree program that you're in. So while you may be required to take certain core courses. So let's use an example. If you're taking an MBA, you might be required to take an accounting class. But most people don't need accounting for the work that they do at Fordham unless they're working in the finance department. So that's an example. It's something to train you for a different job that someday you might get because you got this MBA. It's very hard to relate some of these classes to what your current duties are. We recommend that you apply as early as possible for the tuition remission and the waiver so that you have as many payrolls as possible to apply the taxes if you end up having to pay taxes. If you want, for planning purposes, you can ask us to review the classes that you want to take ahead of time so that you can plan for whether you're going to take them or not. And maybe you're only going to take a few this year instead of the ones you were going to take because you don't want to go over the 5250. So you can plan ahead. You just let us know that it's for planning purposes and not actual. And then you have to submit the same documentation, the class description, the course description, the justification, and your job description. You shouldn't assume that you're gonna qualify for the tax waiver, and you should anticipate the tax because the general rule, like Dan said, is that you will be taxed. The exception is supposed to be fairly narrow. We want to make sure you remember to provide thorough documentation, as much information as possible to help us make that decision. And we just wanted to let you know that some people saw the taxes being taken out, so they dropped the class thinking that the taxes would stop. But if you drop the class after the drop add date, the tuition remission doesn't get, it still has to go through because you waited till after the job add date, I'm sorry. And that means you'll still owe the tax and you won't have the class and you won't be able to take that class again later on for tuition remission because you already took it. It's already on your transcript. So Stacy, if you can move us ahead, thanks. So if you are taking classes just for enjoyment or personal enrichment, you can register for undergrad credit where available since it's a lot cheaper and you could get more credits in, more bang for your buck for the 5250. Credits for graduate tuition, if they don't meet the job related criteria, consider whether you can take the class among more than one calendar year, the classes. So you can take advantage of that 5250 tax fee limit. You might want to mix an elective that you know is never going to qualify with one that you know will qualify. And then this way you have 2 classes a semester, but less impact to that 5250 mark because only 1 class would count against that. Next slide. And then we have someone from financial aid with us to talk about other resources you might have.
Good afternoon. My name is Susan Miranda-Fina, and I work in financial services, assistant director, and I've been asked just to go over some of the financial resources that are available should you decide you need a potential refund, maybe to help assist you with the increase in the taxes. As a graduate student, you're eligible for the Graduate Federal Direct Unsubsidized Loan. Now, in order to put a request in for that, you need to apply for the FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid. And you need to apply to the FAFSA via the studentaid.gov. For example, if you're going to go in the spring, that would be the FAFSA that would be 2021 academic year. If you're going to apply in the fall, that would be the FAFSA 21-22 academic year. All graduate students are eligible for $20,500, which is the annual loan limit. The cap on that is about $136,000. Quite often we get a lot of graduate students that do request these loans, not only to pay the tuition, but they usually like the refund to live off campus. So it would either be used for that purpose or whatever you possibly would need it for. Now, if you do request a loan for $20,500, you can divide it into 3 semesters, fall, spring, and summer. However, in this semester, you must be taking at least 6 credits or half time in order for that loan to disperse. If it's anything less, it won't disperse in that particular term. The origination fee for those federal direct loans is 1.59%. Interest rate is 4.4%. 40%, and that actually can change. The Department of Ed has indicated that July 1st, 2020 to July 30th, 2021, that's the rate that was established. You also have the option, if you want increased funding, other than the $20,500 in addition, to get a Graduate Plus loan. For that, you also need to apply for the FAFSA, the same website, studentaid.gov. However, though, the difference is that it's actually a credit check that they go through. And if you ever have been in collections, or your collections now, or ever went bankrupt, that might negate your ability to be able to receive the Graduate Plus loan. Again, the origination fee is a little bit higher, 4.236. The interest rate, again, is higher. It's fixed at 5.3. And those could potentially change every year. Like in this case, they'll stay until July 30th, 21. I've indicated a website here that you could use. And when you go to this website, it's the Fordham website. It brings you right to the loan section. And then it will actually go through every single step. Now, these loans, you have between 10 to 25 years to pay them back. When you go to this website, there's a calculator on the website to calculate the origination fees so that you know exactly what the net value is. And you could certainly give us a call at Financial Aid. We're 718-817-3800 in case you have any questions, or if you want to review anything regarding your loans. If for some reason you decide you don't want to complete the FAFSA, but you need aid or loans, you can then certainly request a student loan through a bank. That would be like Citibank or Discover Loans. And in that case, you wouldn't be required to do a FAFSA. Okay, so if you have any questions, you could route them through the chat. But I hope this at least provides you some information in case you need additional funding to help with that additional tax increase. Thank you.
I'm sorry. I don't know if I was supposed to be doing this slide. So sorry about that. So contact information for tuition remission. I know that in some of your questions, some of you have experienced some frustration with who do I call if I need more information. And so we wanted to make sure that you had the information here on this slide that we'll be sending to you. Tuition remission applications. They go to Elaine Coombs. She's our benefits assistant, and she can be reached at tuitionremission@fordham.edu. It's better to send it to tuition remission instead of one person in case she's out. There's a few people in benefits that can check that tuition remission email, and we want to make sure that we're answering all of your questions as timely as possible. Graduate tuition tax waivers. We'll speak about this in one of your questions as well, about what's going to happen in the future with that. But for now, they go to Eileen Busby, and her email address is ebusby@fordham.edu, and you see her phone number is there. Payroll services, they handle those tax deductions for anything that's over the 5250. And the contact is Lizette Perez, who's the payroll supervisor, and her information is below. And then you just heard from Susan. So her information is here, and she did mention that 3800 number. So this is the contact information for tuition remission. And that's the end of our presentation. We're going to start with those questions that you submitted beforehand. So I'm going to stop sharing so I can take a look at those questions. Feel free to continue to put your questions in the Q&A, and we'll get to those as soon as we finish those, the questions that we're going to go over right now. And then maybe some of our panelists can answer your questions in the chat while we're going over those first questions. I am going to paraphrase some of those questions. Some of them were a little long, and in the interest of time and to make sure that we can get to all of them, I will shorten some of the questions, but the answers will be comprehensive. So The first question, if my degree is clearly related to my job, but one of the required classes for that degree is not as clearly related to my job and gets rejected, how can I make the case that it is necessary? And so Nancy, I believe, is going to take this question.
Hi, Stacy, thank you. So the determination of whether the job is, the course is related to your job is on a case-by-case basis by each course. And I think I did mention this before, that even if you're taking a degree that is completely related to your job, but there's some classes that are core classes that are really not related to your job, we have to look at it on a course-by-course basis. And that's just what the tax code says. It's not that we're being picayune or something. That's what it tells us we have to do. So many employees pursue degrees for career advancement. So when you do the justification, a trap that you might fall into is, this is going to help me get a better job at Fordham or get a promotion. Don't say that. So you have to relate it to what you're currently doing. So this course will help me in my current role as blah, 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 because I do this and I do that, and I'm going to learn how to do it better. So you have to kind of focus on the now and not on the future. And so some of the courses, as we said, that you have to take for like the MBA might not have a sufficient nexus to what you're doing right now. And those are the courses, unfortunately, that will be taxed. And you want me to read the next, Stacey, I'll read the next question and then I'll direct it to Eileen. Question 2 is, I was told that the tax was being taken out of my check, but I don't have, I do not plan on going to school at this time. Is my money being taken out now? How can we opt out of it? So that's for Eileen to answer.
Okay, so you should not have any taxes coming out if you're not currently going to school and are not using tuition remission. So if you look at your paycheck and you see that you are having taxes coming out for tuition remission, then you should send an email to the tuitionremission@fordham.edu so that we can look into it and work with payroll to get that fixed for you.
Thank you, Eileen. The next question is, I am currently applying to a MS program with Gabelli and would love to be able to know before officially enrolling if there will be even a possibility of taxes, which will also weigh heavily on my decision to enroll. Is there a way that we can forecast if we will have to eventually pay taxes on a specific course if we have all of the required and chosen courses before enrolling? Kamal?
Yes. So thank you, Stacy. So this question has been coming up often now. And as Nancy had also mentioned earlier in her presentation, we would be happy to assist you in assessing whether a particular course which you are wanting to apply for, whether it would qualify for an exemption or not. So yes, so answer is yes, you can submit all the paperwork to us in advance for a pre-approval. And as and when you are applying for it, just send back the pre-approval to us and we will take care of it.
Thank you. It would be helpful to both employees seeking graduate tuition tax waivers and the supervisors who advise on such requests if HR or the appropriate body could provide a list of classes that are generally approved for each division, and more specifically, classes that are typically approved for more sector-specific roles, so that employees and supervisors can have efficient conversations to make informed decisions in advance of registering for classes. Can you speak a little bit to that, Kamal, as well?
Yes, so as both Dan and Nancy have mentioned earlier, this determination whether a tax exemption will be provided to you is based on an assessment course on a course-by-course basis. It is not based on a degree program or which department you are working for or what your core core area of focus is. So it is very difficult for us to provide you a comprehensive, actually any list of courses which you would be approved for. But as I said in my answer to the earlier question, we would be very happy if you submit an application earlier, and we would be able to give a pre-approval or let you know that the course will be approved or not. Thank you.
Thank you, Kamal. Eileen, what is the process for resolving situations where, especially in recent times, one employee was approved for a class and then a subsequent employee with a comparable position is denied the same class?
So the committee reviews each individual waiver request and reads the justification that you supply. So it's very important that you be as thorough as possible in relating the course to your current position. So it's really just depends on how you write your justification. Maybe some employees do a better job of justifying it than others. So that's a really crucial part of the whole process.
And if I may just add here, a similar job may not necessarily mean that the course which one person has taken applies to another person, because the determination again is on course by course basis, and job duties as written in the job description are the driving factor for us. Thank you.
Okay, this question is for Dan. Can we get clarity on who the members of the board are that decide if we are approved or denied and what their qualifications are? If my direct supervisor and department VP are signing off on these classes, saying that these classes are relevant to my job, I find it puzzling that a group so far removed is deciding differently.
Sure. So the committee members who review all of the waiver applications they were listed at the beginning of the presentation, and that's myself, Kamal, Eileen, Nancy, and Damaris, who hasn't spoken yet, but I think you'll hear from. So I understand where the question comes from. We're not in your department. We don't know day to day exactly what you do. So what we do and what our role is to understand the regulations and the legal precedents and the IRS guidances on these issues, and take that knowledge and then look at your job description, the courses, and very importantly, the justification. Now, the question was, I believe part of the question was, how does your supervisor not know better than us? Now, the supervisor certainly knows what you're doing, and I won't speak for any particular supervisor in your group or any other, but I think most supervisors would think that, sure, this is good if he or she takes this additional class. It couldn't hurt, what he or she is doing. But unfortunately, it needs to be a much closer nexus between the course and the current role to satisfy the IRS regulations. So I think that may be where there's a bit of a disconnect or a gap between what the supervisor might view as sufficient connection and what we view as a committee based on our knowledge of the regulations and the tax law.
Thank you. For Eileen, what is the internal timeline for getting applications approved? And I believe the concern here is by the time materials are submitted, it may be taking a longer time to hear back. And the concern is that they'll hear back after the ad drop date. So if you could elaborate a little bit more on the timeline, that would be great.
Sure. Thank you, Stacy. Well, what's really important here is that you get in the applications for the tax waiver as quickly as possible. For instance, we're in the fall semester now, and there are some people who are still submitting their waiver requests. So obviously they're just going to have, 3 paychecks if their waiver is denied. But we are working on a process that we hope to have up and running shortly, certainly for the spring 2021 semester, where when you go online to do your tuition remission application, at the same time, you will apply for your tax waiver request. So that way we'll have all of that information at the same time. So it is a new process, and we'll be sending out an email when we have that up and running. But the most crucial thing is to get your information into us as soon as possible at the beginning of each semester.
Thank you, Eileen. Okay. Is there a way to make this process more transparent? Up until this summer, there wasn't even a portal. Most of us were blindly emailing different people in HR in the hopes of getting our applications into the right hands. When we called to follow up, we were met with callousness, disrespect, and made to feel like we are an inconvenience for trying to take advantage of the heavily touted benefit that is offered to us. So this has a lot going on in this question. So I'm going to try to take it in pieces. So is there a way to make this process more, well, the most important thing here is if you ever feel like you're met with callousness or disrespect from somebody within HR, that will not be tolerated. And so we hope that you will report this to our associate VP who was speaking with us earlier, Kamal Joshi. He is kjoshi2@fordham.edu. And I can send that as part of the materials that Michelle sends after this, along with the presentation. So we want to make sure that everybody is very respectful when they speak to you and make sure that that all of your questions are important. Is there a way to make this process more transparent, which is what we're trying to do today? We're also trying to make more information available on the website. And when we talk about the benefit, I just wanted to clarify, the benefit here is tuition remission. That's the benefit that you're getting from Fordham. The taxes are something separate, and that's not governed by Fordham policy. That's federal law and IRS regulations. Also something that Eileen mentioned, effective spring 2021, we're working with IT to make the tax exemption waiver part of the electronic tuition remission application, where when you're filling it out, you can just attach your documents there, everything can be sent, and you can get notifications about where everything is in the process. For any questions regarding the application process, if you have more questions that weren't answered in the presentation, any additional questions as you're going through the process, you can contact Eileen Busby or Elaine Coombs, and their information is on the PowerPoint slide that we will be sharing with you. HR has provided a guide from the IRS about which classes might be deemed tax exempt. The IRS guide and examples can be found on Fordham's website and in the FAQ document that is sent around to employees who apply. The education must improve the skills required of the employee in his or her current job. In other words, it must be aligned with the employee's job. There seems to be a disconnect between what supervisors and employees view as aligned and what HR, the accounting firm, view as aligned. Can HR develop a guide to help employees elect classes that will be approved? Can HR send classes that are pre-approved by a department by the nature of their job? Could there be a more helpful way to conduct this process with employees? And I believe Dan is going to speak a little bit about that.
Yep. So I hate to sound like a broken record here, but you've heard, now several times that these determinations on a course by course basis, and it's very specific to the employee's job description. And beyond that, the justification, the written explanation that the employee gives to tie the job description to the course description. So unfortunately, we can't give a list of courses that are pre-approved or pre-denied, if you will. But I thought it might be helpful though to give just some courses that we frequently see and that are the reasons when they're denied, why they might be denied. So you get maybe a window into the thought process and the analysis. One that comes up a lot within DAUR and other departments is accounting and CSR principles. Many on the call probably have taken or are taking this course. The course description says that this course focuses on traditional concepts of accounting principles while integrating new CSR, corporate social responsibility, reporting practices for environmental, social, and governance, known as ESG. So, if your job is not, a core accounting job, that course is generally denied. The justification offered by many is that they have budget responsibilities. So, it's not a sufficient nexus to, deal with a budget and working and operating within a budget to tie the accounting course that's dealing with accounting principles and standards and corporate social responsibility and the like. So that course, unless someone is in the field of accounting, it's difficult to find the nexus that would satisfy the IRS. A couple others are leading organizations in the 21st century. Again, that, I don't doubt that course is helpful for anyone that's looking to advance their careers. and to move into leadership positions. But for those that are not currently in leadership positions, again, it's difficult to find a justification and a sufficient nexus between that course and what they're doing now. Many hopefully will move on to where they're leading at Fordham or elsewhere. But right now, if you're not in a leadership position, and more so it's leading organizations, it's impossible to find a nexus there. Similarly, there's a crisis communication and leadership strategies course that we often see. That again, there's the leadership aspect and the crisis communication. Now, many times the justifications that we've seen, this is not unique to DAUR, this is across the university. It's individuals offering justification based on COVID-19. So, of course, everybody, just about everybody at the university has had to deal with the pandemic in their job in some way, shape, or form. But the course, primarily is focused on crisis communication of an organization. So if your current job does not require you to speak on behalf of the university and offer crisis communication, again, that would not have a sufficient nexus. I won't go through all of these. One more is, school finance. And, if we were to just look at the course name, and if the individual employee had a role that had a financial role at the university, one would think that may be enough. But when we look at the course description, that's dealing with funding of educational institutions, state aid, federal, state property tax relating to, K through 12 schools and that sort of thing. So just to give you an idea of what we look at, it's not just the course name, it's not just the description, it's tying the description with the individual's job responsibilities, excuse me, and more specifically, their current job responsibilities. So to circle back and not really answer your question, we can't give a list of what works and what doesn't, because it's impossible. It really depends on the justification. But just to get that, I hope that gave a bit of a sense of the analysis that goes into the decision-making process.
Thank you, Dan. Okay, what criteria does the committee use to determine whether or not respective coursework improves the skills required of the employee in his or her current job, as per the IRS's guidelines? So as noted, the committee will look at the job description, the justification, and the course description to make this determination. Oftentimes within the job description, they will be required skills. And so that may be a way that they can make the determination, but all three are looked at very thoroughly. What is some typical information that an employee can provide to substantiate their claim that their coursework should be excluded from taxation? So the employee must show a sufficient nexus between his or her job duties and the course being taken. And that will be all within your justification. So it's very important to make that, that case within the justification that you submit with your waiver request. And so those were the questions that were submitted beforehand that were shared with HR and Dan and Susan. So I'm just going to take a look at what the questions are in the chat, if you'll just bear with me a moment. So there's a question here that I'm going to address to Eileen Busby. We don't usually hear back about whether our tuition remission tax exemption has been approved for the courses we're taking, no matter how far in advance we submit the tuition remission application. Does HR plan to let us know whether our application has been approved before the add drop date in the future? And I know, Eileen, you spoke about the timeline before. So if you could just reiterate that perhaps to answer that question.
Yeah, absolutely. As we said, going forward, we're going to have you be applying for your tax waiver at the same time you apply for your tuition remission. So the sooner you do that, the better. You do have to apply for your tuition remission by the deadline for add drop. So if you wait until the add drop period to apply for your tuition remission, then you're not going to hear back from us till after that. So the sooner you do all this, the better.
Thank you. It seems like the criteria for what classes that were tax exempt have changed. Some classes that were tax exempt before are no longer. Classes that were loosely tied to the role or for advancing the role were tax exempt. What accounts for this discrepancy? And because Nancy took off her video, I'm assuming she is going to take this question.
Right, we were subject to a risk assessment and an audit about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, and told that we were being a little too lax with this process and we needed to shore it up. Because if we ever got audited by the IRS, there'd be issues. So we had to take a closer look at how the process was done. And we got some training from an outside accounting firm to train this group that's doing the committee work right now. And to also, the VPs were all trained also, the importance of looking at it from a different light. So you might be experiencing that your VPs are actually rejecting stuff in the first instance. And that's a result of that training. And sometimes, they get to us and we have to look at it. And we're trying our best. And I know you probably don't believe us. We're trying our best to find a hook every time we read one of these, to find a hook between your job duties and what the course is about. And if you can tie it in somehow, we'll try our best to approve it. But you have to have it there in writing for us so that if we ever did get audited, we have the nexus in writing, and it's proved that we did look at it and we did our best, and we said, in good faith, we think this is related, okay? But if we can't find anything related, we can't approve it. So that's, I know it was done differently before, but it's not done that way anymore.
And just to add to what Nancy has said, whenever the committee is rejecting a waiver application, it has to be unanimous. So we are very, very careful to see that if there is any hook that we can get into the position description and the justification submitted, the intent is to approve rather than not approve. So I just wanted to share this also with you all.
Thank you. So there are 2 more questions. So we just have time for these 2 because I think we end at 3:50, but I'm going to go ahead and ask them. Can we be given information on what the tax percentage is so we can calculate exactly how much might be withheld if certain courses are not approved for the waiver? And I'm assuming that they can get that information from payroll, but I will open it up to the committee to give a more comprehensive answer about that.
Yes, so the HR does not deal with taxes. The taxes are under the scope of payroll services. But largely, if you were to just get a ballpark estimate, then you can, and I'm emphasizing just a ballpark estimate, do a 25% for federal taxes, about 10% for state and local taxes, and 7.65% for FICA and Medicare.
That's a lot. It's like 40%. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I just want to mention that there were other questions in the chat and I answered them while others were speaking. So you might want to go look for your answers in the Q&A section that's labeled answered. And there's a few of them in there.
Thank you. So this is our last question. Is there a slight benefit to paying taxes on the graduate tuition? Your Social Security payout is determined based on your income, so it helps to factor into a higher payout. Is this correct? Anyone who would like to answer that, please?
I'll take that. So the FICA, which is Social Security, is paid on tuition remission. So to that extent, you are paying a little more into your Social Security benefits. But keep in mind that the way Social Security calculates your benefits, it's a complicated formula based on, I believe, last 30 years of highest earnings. So it may or may not have an impact, but you definitely are paying a little more into your Social Security, and that could possibly make some difference.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank all of our panelists for being here today, all of our attendees, and please feel free if you have any questions after this, because I know that we're at time. There's a lot of contact information that we gave you. Feel free to use it, and Michelle will send out the presentation along with any other materials we said we were going to provide to you. Have a great day, everyone.